Living on the streets teaches you to notice things others miss. When 12-year-old Marcus saw the woman slip something into the businessman's food, he had seconds to decide: stay invisible or save a stranger's life.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
The morning sun cast long shadows across downtown Seattle as Marcus Williams crouched behind a dumpster in the alley beside Romano's Café, one of the city's most upscale dining establishments. At 12 years old, Marcus had been living on the streets for 8 months, ever since his grandmother, his only family, had passed away and he'd aged out of the temporary foster placement that had been his home. Marcus had learned to survive by being invisible, by watching and listening without being noticed. The streets had taught him that adults either ignored homeless children completely or saw them as problems to be removed. So he had perfected the art of staying hidden while observing the world around him. Romano's Café was one of his regular spots, not because he could afford to eat there, but because the kitchen staff sometimes left day-old pastries in the dumpster, and the wealthy clientele occasionally dropped change that Marcus could collect after they left. From his hiding spot, he had a clear view through the large cafe windows and had come to recognize many of the regular customers. One of those regulars was an elderly man in expensive suits who arrived every Tuesday at exactly 11:30 a.m. Marcus had been watching him for weeks, noting his routine. Always the same corner table, always ordered the salmon with a side salad, always read the Financial Times while he ate. The man looked important, the kind of person other diners whispered about and servers treated with extra deference. What Marcus didn't know was that the elderly man was William Harrison, a billionaire philanthropist whose foundation had funded schools, hospitals, and homeless shelters across the Pacific Northwest. At 73, William had built his fortune in technology and now spent his time giving it away, though he preferred to do so quietly and without fanfare. This Tuesday started like any other. Marcus watched as William arrived precisely on schedule, greeted by the maitre d' with the respect reserved for VIP customers. William was escorted to his usual corner table, where he settled in with his newspaper and ordered his regular meal. But something was different today. Marcus noticed a woman at a table across the restaurant who kept glancing in William's direction. She was well-dressed and attractive, probably in her 40s, with the kind of polished appearance that suggested wealth and education. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't her appearance, but her behavior. The woman seemed nervous, checking her watch frequently and fidgeting with her purse. More concerning to Marcus was the way she positioned herself so she could watch William while appearing to read her own newspaper. In his months on the street, Marcus had developed an instinct for reading people's intentions, and this woman's behavior triggered his internal warning system. Marcus shifted his position to get a better view of the restaurant interior. From his new vantage point, he could see both William's table and the woman's table clearly. When William's food arrived, the woman's attention became even more focused, though she tried to appear casual. The busy lunch crowd provided perfect cover as the woman stood up from her table, ostensibly heading toward the restroom. But instead of continuing to the back of the restaurant, she made a subtle detour that brought her close to William's table. William was absorbed in his newspaper, unaware of her approach. Marcus watched in horror as the woman quickly reached into her purse, withdrew a small vial, and emptied its contents into William's coffee cup. The entire action took less than 3 seconds, executed with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested this wasn't her first attempt at poisoning someone. The woman returned to her table, sat down, and resumed reading her newspaper as if nothing had happened. But Marcus could see the tension in her posture as she waited and watched for William to take a drink. Marcus's mind raced. He had witnessed what was clearly an attempt to poison the elderly man, but what could a homeless 12-year-old do about it? If he ran into the restaurant shouting accusations, who would believe him? The well-dressed woman would deny everything, and Marcus would likely be thrown out, or worse. But as Marcus watched William lift the coffee cup toward his lips, time seemed to slow down. The old man was about to drink poison, and Marcus was the only person in the world who knew it. In that moment, Marcus realized that being invisible had given him a unique perspective that came with an enormous responsibility. Marcus made his choice. He burst through the cafe's front door, his worn sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor. "Don't eat that!" he screamed at the top of his lungs, pointing directly at William's table. "Don't drink the coffee." She put something in it. The entire restaurant fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks paused halfway to mouths, and every eye in the room turned to stare at the small, dirty boy who had just disrupted their elegant meal. William, startled by the commotion, set down his coffee cup and looked at Marcus with curiosity rather than annoyance. The woman across the restaurant had gone pale, her newspaper trembling in her hands. "What did you say, son?" William asked gently, his voice carrying clearly in the silent restaurant. Marcus approached the table cautiously, aware that security would probably remove him at any moment. "The lady over there," he said, pointing at the woman. "She put something in your coffee when you weren't looking. I saw her do it." The woman stood up quickly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous," she said loudly. "I've never seen this child before in my life. He's obviously disturbed. Someone should call security." But William raised his hand to stop the approaching maitre d'. "Wait," he said, studying Marcus's face. There was something about the boy's earnest expression and the specific nature of his accusation that gave William pause. "Which lady?" William asked Marcus. Marcus pointed directly at the woman. "She was watching you the whole time. She got up like she was going to the bathroom, but she came by your table instead and put something from a little bottle into your coffee." The woman's face flushed red with anger. "This is insane. I was simply walking to the restroom. This child is obviously making up stories for attention or money. You can't seriously be listening to him." William looked at his coffee cup, then back at Marcus. "You're certain about what you saw?" "Yes, sir. I've been watching from outside for a long time. I know your routine. She doesn't belong here. And when your food came, she got all focused on you, like she was waiting for something." The restaurant manager appeared at William's side. "Mr. Harrison, I'm so sorry about this disruption. We'll have the boy removed immediately." But William shook his head. "Actually, I'd like to have this coffee tested before anyone drinks it." The woman's eyes widened with panic. "William, this is completely unnecessary. You're embarrassing me and yourself by entertaining the delusions of a street child." It was then that William realized the woman had used his name, though they had never been introduced. In a restaurant where he was known but typically left alone, a stranger addressing him by name was highly unusual. "I'm sorry," William said to the woman, "but I don't believe we've been formally introduced." "How did you know my name?" The woman stammered. You're a well-known businessman. Everyone knows who you are." But Marcus had noticed something else. "She's got the little bottle in her purse," he said. "She put it back after she used it." William nodded to the restaurant manager. "Please call the police. And don't let anyone leave until they arrive." The woman made a sudden move toward the exit, but two waiters blocked her path. Her composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "He ruined my family. His company destroyed my father's business. He deserves to pay." The confession hung in the air as shocked murmurs rippled through the restaurant. The woman, realizing what she had just admitted, sank back into her chair with her head in her hands. Within minutes, police sirens could be heard approaching. Detective Sarah Chen arrived with her partner and immediately took control of the scene. After speaking with William, Marcus, and several witnesses, she carefully bagged the coffee cup as evidence and searched the woman's purse, finding the empty vial Marcus had described. The woman, identified as Rebecca Walsh, was arrested for attempted murder. As she was led away in handcuffs, she continued to rant about perceived wrongs committed by Williams' company, revealing a level of obsession and planning that suggested this wasn't a spontaneous act. Detective Chen took Marcus aside for a more detailed statement. "You probably saved this man's life," she told him. "What you did was incredibly brave." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "I just saw something wrong and said something. That's what people are supposed to do, right?" After giving his statement to the police, Marcus expected to slip away and return to his life on the streets. But William approached him before he could leave. "Marcus," William said, having learned the boy's name during the police interview, "I owe you my life. Is there anything I can do to repay you?" Marcus looked at the old man with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. In his experience, adult promises rarely materialized into actual help. "You don't owe me anything, mister. I just did what anyone should do." "But not everyone would have done it," William replied. "It took courage to speak up, especially when you knew people might not believe you." William paused, studying Marcus's worn clothes and thin frame. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" Marcus hesitated, then admitted, "A couple days ago, I guess." William's expression grew serious. "Marcus, would you be willing to have lunch with me? Not here, obviously, given the circumstances, but somewhere we can talk." An hour later, Marcus found himself in a small diner across town, nervously eating the first hot meal he'd had in days, while William sat across from him, asking gentle questions about his life and circumstances. Marcus told William about his grandmother who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 4. He explained how she had worked 2 jobs to keep them in their small apartment, and how her sudden heart attack 8 months ago had left him with nowhere to go. "The foster home was okay," Marcus said, "but they said I was too old and had too many problems for a permanent placement. So I left." William listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never making Marcus feel like he was being interrogated. There was something about the old man's gentle manner that made Marcus feel safe enough to share his story. "Marcus," William said finally, "I'd like to make you an offer, but I want you to think about it carefully before you answer." Marcus looked up from his plate, suspicious of what was coming. "I have a large house with several guest rooms. My housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, has been with me for 20 years, and her husband Miguel helps maintain the grounds. They're good people who understand what it means to take care of others." William paused to let this sink in. "I'd like to offer you a place to stay with no strings attached. You'd have your own room, regular meals, and we'd get you enrolled in school. In exchange, all I'd ask is that you give honest communication a chance and consider letting me help you build a better future." Marcus stared at William, trying to process what he was hearing. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "I know that you risked your own safety to save a stranger's life," William replied. "I know that you've survived on your own for 8 months at age 12, which tells me you're resourceful and strong. And I know that you chose to do the right thing, even when it would have been easier to stay silent." William leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, I've spent most of my adult life trying to help people, usually by writing checks to organizations that do good work. But today, you helped me in the most direct way possible. Maybe this is my chance to help someone directly too." Marcus was quiet for a long time, wrestling with a decision that could change everything. Trust didn't come easily to someone who had been disappointed by adults before, but something about William felt different. "What if it doesn't work out?" Marcus asked quietly. "Then we'll figure out something else," William said simply. "But I'd like us to try." 3 months later, Marcus was settled into William's house, a spacious but comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood that felt more like a sanctuary than a mansion. He was attending seventh grade at a local private school and slowly learning what it felt like to have stability and security. Mrs. Rodriguez had become like a grandmother to him, and Miguel had taught him to play chess in the evenings. The transition hadn't been without challenges. Marcus had initially struggled with nightmares and trust issues, common among children who had experienced trauma and abandonment. William had connected him with Dr. Elizabeth Santos, a therapist who specialized in helping children who had lived through difficult circumstances. It's normal to feel suspicious of good things, Dr. Santos had told Marcus during one of their early sessions. When you've had to protect yourself for so long, it's hard to believe that safety can last. Marcus had also struggled academically at first. While he was intelligent and naturally curious, his education had been interrupted by his grandmother's illness and his months on the street. William had hired a tutor to help him catch up, but more importantly, he had been patient with the process. The school's social worker, Mrs. Patterson, had been briefed on Marcus's background and helped him navigate the social challenges of being the new kid with a complicated history. Some of his classmates had heard news reports about the Café incident and were curious about his story. But Mrs. Patterson and William had worked together to protect Marcus's privacy while helping him build friendships. William kept his promise about no strings attached, but he also provided opportunities for Marcus to grow and learn. They had established a routine of evening conversations where Marcus could share his experiences at school and William could offer guidance without being pushy. The attempted poisoning case had made national news, with Rebecca Walsh ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison. Her obsession with William had stemmed from a business dispute from decades earlier, which she had blamed for her family's subsequent financial struggles. Mental health experts testified that she had spent years planning her revenge, studying William's routines and habits, until she found what she believed was the perfect opportunity. For Marcus, the attention had been overwhelming at first, but William had helped him navigate the media interest while protecting his privacy. More importantly, William had connected Marcus with a counselor who specialized in helping children who had experienced trauma and loss. "You saved my life," William told Marcus one evening as they sat in the library, Marcus working on homework while William read nearby. "But I think maybe we saved each other's lives that day." Marcus looked up from his math problems. "What do you mean?" William smiled. "I've been living a pretty isolated life for an old man with more money than he knows what to do with. Having you here, watching you discover things and grow, it's reminded me what's really important." As Marcus settled into his new life, he never forgot the lessons the streets had taught him about watching, listening, and acting when something was wrong. But now those skills were part of a larger toolkit that included education, stability, and the knowledge that there were adults in the world who could be trusted. The cafe incident became a defining moment that showed Marcus his own courage and William the power of direct, personal connection. It also demonstrated that sometimes the most important interventions come from the most unexpected sources, and that the ability to see clearly and act bravely isn't limited by age, circumstances, or social status. Years later, when Marcus graduated from high school with honors and prepared to attend college on a full scholarship that William had helped him secure, he still remembered the moment when he had burst through those cafe doors. It remained a reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is speak up when you see something wrong, regardless of whether anyone expects you to have a voice.